Welcome, listeners. They told me I was lucky. That was the first lie. After the outbreak, luck stopped meaning survival and started meaning you were still useful. They don't say immune anymore. They have cleaner words now, words that sound like paperwork. Delayed onset, level orange, compliance required. They give you a wristband, a device that blinks like a second heartbeat, a form with your name already printed. Then they ask you to do something simple: log everything, because the most dangerous phase isn't when you lose control. It's when you're still calm enough to cooperate. I tested positive and didn't change fast enough to get written off, so they cleared me to go, and they started watching. Content note: this story contains psychological horror, medical quarantine themes, and institutional surveillance. The horror is not graphic. And now, the record begins here. Still Cooperative by NoSleep Scribe. Chapter 1, Day 0. Positive Delayed. They told me I was lucky. That was the first lie. The second was kinder. You don't have symptoms. The third was procedural. You're cleared to go. They didn't say immune, not once. Nobody says that anymore. Not out loud, not on forms, not where it can be overheard and repeated by someone desperate enough to make it a religion. The first year, they called everyone who didn't turn in 48 hours a miracle. By year 3, miracles had subcategories. They called it delayed onset, like it was stuck in traffic. I remember the nurse's hands more than her face. Gloved, quick, a little too practiced. She swabbed the inside of my cheek like she was wiping a spill off a counter, and when the test strip bloomed red, she didn't flinch. She didn't widen her eyes. She didn't do that human thing people do when they realize your life has just changed. She pressed her lips together and reached for a clipboard. Name, she said. I gave it. Date of birth? I gave it. Known exposure window. I opened my mouth, and then I saw the sign taped to the plexiglass between us. Do not discuss incident locations with staff. Staff are not cleared for cross-event specifics. Even the details were contagious now. I don't know, I said. She nodded as if that made things easier. Behind her, on the wall, there were posters meant to be comforting, the same ones they'd printed in the first months, before they realized the infected didn't cough on doorknobs, before they realized it lived deeper than breath, before they realized that by the time someone got scared, it was already too late. The nurse clipped a sticker to my file, a color code. I didn't know what it meant until she pulled out a second sticker and held it beside the first, like she was comparing paint samples. She chose orange and pressed it down hard. Her voice stayed even. You're positive. I waited for the rest, the part where she tells me I'm going to turn, to call my family, to make peace. She didn't offer any of it. Instead, she flipped to a printed page and read like she'd read 1,000 times. Your onset is delayed. You are currently asymptomatic. This does not indicate immunity. This does not indicate resistance. This does not indicate recovery. You are not cleared for communal sheltering. You are not eligible for short-term relocation. She paused. Her eyes flicked up, met mine, then dropped again. You are cleared for independent quarantine in a private residence for a period to be determined by clinical monitoring. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like antiseptic. How long? This time she did flinch just a little. Not because she was afraid, because she was tired. I can't answer that, she said. You can't or you won't. She didn't react to the edge in my voice. She just turned another page. Delayed onset cases have variable progression. Onset may occur within hours or within weeks. Cases outside that range have been documented. Failure to progress does not indicate safety. Failure to progress does not indicate clearance. Her words were rehearsed. They didn't belong to her. They belonged to a committee, a printer, a binder. I leaned forward. I feel fine. I know, she said, and for the first time, something human threaded through her tone. Not kindness, not sympathy, a kind of irritation that felt dangerously close to grief. I know you do. She slid a thin packet under the plexiglass. It was stapled at the corner. My name was already printed on it. That alone made my stomach tighten, like the system had been waiting for me specifically. On the front, in bold, delayed onset protocol, level orange, compliance required. There was a number at the bottom, a hotline, a QR code, a list of symptoms to self-report. It looked like a pamphlet you'd get after donating blood. Under that, a waiver. I didn't touch it yet. My throat went dry. I'm not going to hurt anyone. You don't know that, she replied. So fast it didn't feel like it came from the script. Then she caught herself, smoothed her voice back into neutral. Sign the acknowledgement on page 3. I flipped the packet open. The pages smelled freshly printed, warm paper, sharp ink. The system list was long, but the first few were strange, not what you'd expect from a sickness. Reduced fatigue response, reduced pain response, increased oxygen draw, compulsive movement, compulsive stillness, emotional flattening, delayed empathy response, involuntary micro-mirroring. I reread the last one. Micro-mirroring? The nurse's eyes flicked up again, and her expression went flat. I can't interpret symptoms, she said. Of course she couldn't. Interpretation was dangerous. Interpretation created patterns. Patterns made people ask questions that didn't fit in pamphlets. I kept reading. Report immediately if you experience unprompted repetition of phrases, sudden interest in sound, sudden disinterest in faces, loss of disgust response, impulse to bite or taste non-food materials, dream content involving crowds. I turned the page. Page 2 was the quarantine instructions. Page 3 was the acknowledgement. At the top, in large font, I understand that delayed onset is not immunity. I understand that I am a public health risk. I understand that my status may change without notice. I understand that my compliance may be verified. Verified. Another word that didn't belong in healthcare. I signed because I learned a long time ago, refusing a form doesn't make the system stop. It just makes it turn its head toward you. When I slid it back, the nurse pulled it away without looking at my signature, like it didn't matter what I wrote, like the act of signing was the real point. Someone will contact you, she said. Medical? A small, practiced pause. Yes, she said, and I heard the lie. in how cleanly it fit. She handed me a sealed bag, my swab record, my packet, a wristband I was supposed to wear, and a little device the size of a pager. "What's this?" "A monitor," she said. "Temperature, pulse, movement, a tracker." Her mouth twitched. "For compliance." The plexiglass reflected my face back at me. Normal, steady, human. Monsters are comforting when they look like monsters. A person who looks like you is how panic spread. I stood. My knees felt steady. My muscles didn't ache. I'd slept 4 hours the night before, and I still felt sharp and awake. On the way out, there was a line of people waiting to be tested. Families, couples, a man holding a toddler on his hip, rocking gently like he could soothe illness by rhythm alone. They watched me walk past. They watched the orange sticker on my packet. They moved away without meaning to. Just a half step, a subtle drift, like iron filings responding to a magnet. I could feel the space opening around me, widening into something that didn't belong to my body, but did belong to my new classification. I walked faster. Outside, the air was cold and bright. Winter sun, bracing wind. The world looked too normal for this kind of sentence. I got into my car. I sat there with the bag in my lap and the tracker in my hand. It had a single button. Under the button, in tiny text, "Activate upon departure." I stared at it until the letters blurred, then forced myself to click it. A green light blinked once, then a tone, soft, almost polite, chirped. It sounded like something that would remind you to drink water. My phone buzzed immediately. Unknown number. I answered because my body was suddenly full of obedience. "Hello?" A man's voice. Calm. Too calm. The kind of voice that had never had to beg. "Is this..." He said my name correctly, with the exact pronunciation I'd only heard from people who'd seen it written down. "Yes?" "This is observation," he said. "You've left the facility?" "I'm in my car," I said, as if that mattered. "We see that," he replied. My fingers tightened around the tracker. I looked down at it like it had betrayed me by doing what it promised. "Okay," I said. "What now?" "Now you go home," he said, "and you begin logging." "Logging what?" "Everything," he said, like it was obvious. "Sleep, appetite, mood, motor control, dreams." Dreams, that word hit wrong, like a tooth scraping on metal. Why dreams? A beat of silence, not hesitation. Calculation. Because delayed onset cases sometimes report predictive dream content, he said. Predictive of what? Of progression, he said smoothly. I swallowed. How often do I log? Every 4 hours, he said. You'll receive prompts. Every 4 hours, I repeated, because my mind was trying to decide if that was care or control. Yes. And if I don't? Another silence. This one was shorter. If you don't, he said, we escalate your compliance protocol. Escalate, not treat, not assist. Escalate. My voice sharpened. Are you medical? I'm part of the observation team, he said again. Like the words were a fence he wouldn't step over. I pulled into traffic. The road felt familiar. The city looked the same. People walked their dogs. Someone jogged past the testing clinic, earbuds in, cheeks pink from the cold. A couple argued quietly outside a coffee shop, their breath visible. No one knew what was ticking inside me. They couldn't see it, but the system could. I forced my voice calm. How many delayed onset cases are there? We don't discuss numbers. Why not? We don't discuss numbers, he repeated, and in the repetition I heard a different kind of warning. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I tried another angle. How long do people last? A pause, then. We don't discuss individual outcomes. I'm not asking about individuals, I said. I'm asking about me. His voice didn't change. We don't discuss outcomes. My hands were sweating. I turned onto my street. My apartment building came into view. 3 floors, brick, old. A place that had survived storms and rent hikes and a decade of other people's lives. It looked like safety. It looked like a place where you could hide. But the moment I thought that, the green light on the tracker blinked again, and the illusion cracked. Do you live alone? The man asked. Yes. Good, he said, and I hated the relief in his tone, not because it was cruel, because it was practical. Do you have anyone who will attempt to enter your residence? What? I asked a little too loud. Friends, family, partners, he said, as if listing animals you might attract with food. Anyone who will be drawn to you. I didn't answer fast enough. I have a sister, I said finally. Will she attempt contact? Not if I tell her not to. Another beat. You will tell her not to, he said, and it wasn't a suggestion. I parked. The building's front door was propped open with a rock, as usual. I stepped out of the car. As I walked up the path, I realized something I hadn't noticed since the nurse read the list. My body felt good. Not just normal good, better than it had in weeks. My lungs pulled in cold air like they were greedy for it. My heart beat slow and steady. My muscles felt ready, coiled, as if I'd slept 12 hours and eaten perfectly and trained exactly right. I stopped on the sidewalk and pressed 2 fingers to my neck. Pulse calm. Too calm. You're currently asymptomatic, the man said through my phone, as if he could see my hand at my throat. That can feel energizing. Energizing, I echoed. Yes, he said. Don't trust it. The hairs on my arms rose. I went inside. I climbed the stairs. Each step felt light, effortless. My legs didn't complain. My joints didn't creak. It wasn't a relief. It was a warning dressed up like wellness. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and slid the deadbolt. Then I stood there, bag in my hand, phone to my ear, listening to the tiny green light blink like a heartbeat I didn't consent to. Is someone coming here? I asked. We do in-person compliance checks if your logs indicate increased risk, he divulged, or if your device indicates noncompliance. I stared at the tracker. What's noncompliance? I asked. Leaving? Leaving is not prohibited, he said, but it is tracked. You must not enter communal spaces. You must not board public transportation. You must not enter shelters. You must not enter medical facilities without authorization. And if I do, my voice came out thin, then you become a priority, he said. Priority, my stomach turned. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table. The room was still, quiet, my life arranged in small normal objects, a mug in the sink, a coat on a chair, a book face down like I'd paused mid-sentence. Your first prompt will arrive in 10 minutes, the man said. You will answer it. What if I don't want to? I asked, and the question surprised me with how honest it was. A pause, longer this time. Then his voice softened just slightly, in a way that felt rehearsed. You do want to, he said. You just don't want what it means. I closed my eyes. That was the first thing he said that felt true. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. Welcome. Level orange logging begins today. Failure to log equals escalation. Remember, delay is not safety. Underneath that, a link. I clicked it. A web page opened with my name at the top and a series of empty fields waiting to be filled like a confession booth. Mood, sleep, appetite, pain, fatigue, dream content. And at the bottom, a section I hadn't expected. Observation notes, optional. Optional, the lie of choice again. I scrolled down and saw a paragraph in fine print. Delayed onset cases provide critical data for population risk management and behavior prediction. Your compliance contributes to public safety. Behavior prediction. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like English and started looking like what they were, a justification, not for helping me, for using me. My throat tightened. Why are you doing this? I asked into the phone. Why the logs? Why the device? Why are you so prepared for me? The man didn't answer right away. When he spoke, his voice was still calm, but something in it had hardened. Because, he said, we've seen delayed onset cases before. I forced the words out. And what happens? Another pause, then carefully. You stay functional longer than most. That wasn't comfort. It was a sentence with a blade hidden inside. I swallowed again. And then? His voice went quiet. And then you help us understand. And in that moment, with my apartment around me and my normal life like props on a stage, a certainty crystallized inside me. They weren't afraid of the infected. They were afraid of the infected who could still answer questions. They were afraid of the ones who stayed aware long enough to describe what it felt like to stop being human in stages. I looked at the observation notes field. I started typing, not because I trusted them, because I suddenly knew that if I didn't leave a record of my own, someone else would write it for me, and they would call it data, management, public safety. They would never call it what it was, a countdown, a specimen, a person being watched while they slowly disappear. Log 1, day 0, mood stable, sleep 4 hours, appetite normal, pain none, fatigue none, dream content unclear. Observation notes. My body feels too good, like it's lying. My phone buzzed again. Another text, immediate, automated. Log received, good compliance. Next prompt in 4 hours. Good compliance, like a dog. I sat down at my kitchen table, stared at the tracker, and listened to it blink. Somewhere, behind screens and protocols and calm voices, someone watched that blink too. And I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't watching to see if I got worse. They were watching to see what I could still tell them while I was still me. Day 0 summary. Designation orange. Phase 1. No action required. Chapter 2, Day 3. Baseline drift. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the absence of sound. There was still traffic outside, still pipes knocking in the walls, still my refrigerator's low, irritated hum. But the way silence no longer pressed back when I stopped moving. It used to. There was always a subtle resistance to stillness, a reminder that bodies are meant to fidget, adjust, breathe louder than necessary. Now, when I sat without shifting, nothing complained. My muscles didn't itch. My joints didn't ask for mercy. Time slid past me like oil. I realized I haven't yawned in days. I logged it. Log 4, Day 3. Mood stable. Sleep 6 hours, no interruption. Appetite normal. Pain none. Fatigue none. Observation notes. Stillness feels easier than it should. I haven't yawned in days. The response came in seconds. Log received. No action required. That phrase had started to appear more often. No action required. As if my body was passing a test I hadn't agreed to. By day 3, the routine had calcified. Wake, log, eat, log, sit, log, sleep, log. 4-hour intervals that fractured time into manageable segments, each one neatly observed and stored somewhere I wasn't allowed to see. I kept catching myself staring at the tracker as I ate, as I brushed my teeth with a mint toothpaste I hated, as I filled in the logs on my laptop. The green light gazed back as if it were observing me in person. The tracker never left my wrist. I showered with it wrapped in plastic, like a wound that wasn't supposed to heal. Sometimes I caught myself adjusting my movements, not consciously, not fully, to keep the device from chirping or blinking in ways that might trigger escalation. I didn't know what escalation looked like, but I'd learned quickly that not knowing was part of the control. At noon on the third day, my sister called. I stared at her name on my phone until it stopped ringing. Then I stared at the missed call notification like it was evidence of a crime. I imagined her voice, too loud, too bright, asking if I was okay, asking why I hadn't returned her last text, asking questions that required lies or truths that would make her step backward the way everyone else had. I logged the missed call under mood instead. That felt wrong, but it felt less wrong than letting her hear how calm I sounded. At 4 p.m., the prompt arrived early. This was new, and I noticed immediately. Prompt: please complete the following additional fields. Below my usual checklist, 3 new questions had appeared. Do you feel observed? Do you feel compelled to perform? Do you experience discomfort when unobserved? I stared at the screen. I answered the first 2 immediately. My fingers paused over the third, longer than they should have. I typed uncertain. The response took longer this time, 30 seconds, then a full minute. Finally, log received. Note: uncertainty is a common response in delayed onset cases. Continue normal activity. I'd felt incomplete. Not lonely, not afraid, like a sentence that hadn't reached its punctuation. I logged that too. The man from observation called that evening. I recognized his voice immediately. Calm, measured, the sound of someone who only smiled when appropriate. "You're adapting well," he said, after confirming my identity. "Is that good?" I asked. "For you," he said, "and for us." There it was again, the split, the invisible line where my interests stopped aligning with theirs. "For us how?" I pressed. He didn't answer directly. Delayed onset cases often experience early behavioral stabilization, reduced anxiety, reduced distress. It's one of the reasons you're able to remain independent, as long as your compliance and awareness are within acceptable parameters. "Awareness of what?" I asked. "Of yourself," he said. "Of change. Isn't everyone aware of that?" "No," he replied softly. "Most people panic or deny or fixate on outcomes. You've stayed present." Another word that sounded like praise and warning at the same time. "I want to see my sister," I said suddenly. The silence on the line sharpened. "That would be unwise," he said. "Unwise or prohibited?" "Unwise," he repeated, "at this stage." "At this stage of what?" "Of observation." There it was. He'd said it without wrapping it in softer language. Observation. I clenched my jaw. "I'm not an experiment." "You're not just an experiment," he corrected gently. "You're a data point with context. That matters." My stomach turned. "I don't consent to this," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "You already did," he said, "when you signed." "I signed to quarantine," I snapped, "not to be studied." "You signed to comply," he replied. "Compliance includes reporting. Reporting includes analysis." "And what if I stop?" His voice didn't harden. It didn't need to. "Then we lose the opportunity to learn from you," he said, "and we'd have to change how we manage your case." "Manage?" I echoed. "Yes." I closed my eyes. I thought of the orange sticker, the way the nurse had chosen it like a tool, the way the system had already decided I was more useful, watchable than cured. "What happens to people like me?" I asked quietly. He didn't dodge this time. "They progress," he said, "eventually. And before that, they help us understand the slope. The slope, not the fall. The angle, the timing, the predictability." My skin prickled again. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent. A recognition that my role wasn't to survive. It was to last. "How many of us are there?" I asked. He exhaled. I could hear it clearly through the phone. "Enough to matter," he said. "Not enough to publicize." I thought of the added questions, the behavioral prompts, the early calls. "You're comparing us," I said. "Delayed cases. You're ranking us." "Yes," he said without shame. "Why?" "Because some of you remain articulate longer," he said. "Some of you retain moral reasoning. Some of you continue to self-report accurately, even as other faculties shift." "And those are the ones you want," I said. "Yes." Not to save, to study, to predict, to prevent panic elsewhere by sacrificing clarity here. I sat down heavily in my chair, surprised by the weight of my own body. It was the first time all day something had felt heavy. "I feel fine," I said. "Too fine." "That's expected," he replied. "Early plateau." I pictured a graph rising, flattening, then dropping off sharply. Do you know when I'll turn? I asked. No. Do you know if I'll know when it happens? Another pause. Most delayed cases report a period of insight, he said carefully. A window where they understand that something irreversible has begun. And then, he said, they stop caring. The words hit harder than any diagnosis. Stop caring. Not rage, not hunger, apathy. I don't want that, I said. I know, he replied, and for the first time, his voice held something like regret. That's why your logs are valuable. Because I could still want, because I could still object, because I could still describe the loss as it happened. The call ended shortly after. No threats, no reassurances, just a polite reminder to continue logging and an automated text confirming the conversation had been recorded. That night I dreamed for the first time since the diagnosis, not of crowds, of rooms, white ones, empty ones, rows of desks with screens glowing softly, displaying lines of text that looked suspiciously like my own words. People stood behind the screens, not doctors, not soldiers, analysts, observers, faces neutral, eyes intent. They didn't speak. They just watched the words appear. I woke before the prompt, heart steady, breath slow, too slow. I logged the dream. Log 7, day 3. Dream content. Observed environments. No threat response. The reply came faster than ever. Log received. Flagged for review. Please stand by for follow-up. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone warm in my hand, tracker blinking softly like a second pulse. I understood then, fully, clearly. This was about documenting the precise moment when a human being could still explain themselves, and the exact second they stopped trying. And the most terrifying part? I wasn't panicking. I was curious. I logged that too. Day 3 summary. Designation orange. Phase 2. Response quality high. Chapter 3. Day 7. Useful behavior. The follow-up came in person. They didn't call ahead. They didn't knock. The tracker chirped once, sharp, louder than usual, and my phone lit up with a single line of text. Compliance check in progress. Do not exit. I was standing in my kitchen, rinsing a mug I hadn't finished. The water ran clear. My hands were steady. I felt fine. That was becoming a problem. There was a soft click at my door, not forced, not violent. A key, used carefully. I stood there, mug still in my hand, watching the handle turn. 2 people entered. They wore civilian clothes, not uniforms, not scrubs, the kind of careful neutrality that signaled intention without inviting questions. 1 man, 1 woman, both middle-aged, both calm in that way that didn't require effort. The woman smiled first. Thank you for remaining inside, she said. I didn't have a choice, I replied. Her smile widened a fraction. You did. You chose correctly. They didn't ask permission to sit. The man took the chair across from mine at the table. The woman leaned against the counter, folding her arms loosely, like she was settling in for a conversation she'd already had many times. The tracker blinked green. The man glanced at it, then at me. You're 7 days post-positive. Yes. No motor degradation, he continued. No affective volatility. No compliance failures. I missed one prompt, I said. He nodded. We saw. Of course they did. The woman tilted her head. You corrected within 3 minutes. I was in the shower. That aligns with the data, she said pleasantly. Data. The word didn't sting anymore. That realization unsettled me more than their presence. The man placed a tablet on the table between us. He didn't turn it toward me. We're expanding your logging parameters, he said. I waited. Beginning today, we'll be adding active tasks. Why now? I asked. Because you've reached baseline stability, the woman replied. You're no longer reacting, you're functioning. Isn't that good? For containment, she said. Yes. For understanding, the man finished the thought. Very. He finally turned the tablet so I could see. On the screen was a graph. My name at the top, days on the x-axis, metrics on the y, mood, heart rate, movement, sleep cycles, response latency. I stared at the lines. They were smooth, too smooth, trending gently downward in places that should have spiked. That's me? I asked. Yes, he said. I leaned closer. I look stable. The woman nodded. You're one of our cleanest curves. Very rare to see one this clean. Clean like a water sample. You compare us, I said. They didn't deny it. We contextualize, the man corrected. Delayed onset manifests differently, depending on personality structure, baseline empathy, executive function. And where do I fall? For the first time since entering, the woman's eyes left my face. She glanced at the tablet, then right back at me. Her habit of never blinking while speaking was unsettling. High self-monitoring, high verbal articulation, strong compliance orientation. I'm not compliant, I said automatically. She smiled again. You are. The man tapped the screen. Today's first task is observational. Of what? Media, he said. We've curated a short clip. He pressed play before I could object. The screen filled with shaky footage. A shelter, overcrowded. People pressed together, shouting. Someone screaming about infection. Someone else crying. A man restrained by 3 others as he begged to be let go. I watched. I waited for the knot in my chest, the heat behind my eyes, the reflexive need to look away. It didn't come. The woman watched me, not the screen. Describe your emotional response, she said. I frowned, not in distress, but concentration. It's loud. Emotionally, she clarified. I know, I said. I searched myself. I feel detached. How detached? The man asked. I considered. Like I'm watching something instructional. The woman's eyes flicked to the man. A look passed between them, quick, satisfied. Continue, she said. They're afraid, I added, but it feels inefficient. The crowding, the shouting, it increases risk. The man stopped the video. Do you feel sympathy? I thought about it. I understand why they're upset, I said carefully. That wasn't the question. No, I admitted. I don't feel it. The woman nodded slowly. That's useful. I stiffened. Useful for what? For prediction, she said. For triage modeling. For anticipating behavior before loss of control. You're mapping when we stop caring, I said. Yes, the man replied, and what we're capable of before that point. A chill traced my spine. Not fear exactly, recognition. You don't just want to know when I'll turn, I said. You want to know how long I can still follow instructions. The man didn't deny it. We want to know how long you remain reliable. I stood up. The movement was smooth, effortless. My heart rate didn't spike. The woman tilted her head again. Do you feel threatened? I searched for it. I paused, concerned. She smiled, satisfied. Good. Fear complicates data. I looked at the door, at the lock, at the two of them standing between me and the rest of the world. If I refuse, I said, what happens? The man answered calmly. Your status escalates. Observation becomes containment. And if I comply? You remain independent, the woman said. You remain articulate. You remain valuable. There it was, that word again. I sank back into my chair. When does this end? I asked. The man met my eyes. When your logs stop being trustworthy. And how will you know? He hesitated just a fraction. When you stop asking questions, he said. The woman checked her watch. Second task. She slid a piece of paper across the table. A photograph. A still frame from security footage. A man mid-turn. Eyes unfocused. Jaw slack, blood at the corner of his mouth. I recognized the posture, the early footage they showed on the news before they stopped showing faces. Describe him, she said. I looked down. I felt nothing. He's compromised, I said. Motor control degraded, awareness minimal. Human? The man asked. The question was soft. I hesitated, not because I was unsure, but because I was choosing language. He was, I said. He's past that threshold now. The woman's breath caught, not in horror, but interest. That's earlier than average, she murmured. I looked up sharply. Earlier than average for what? For classification shift, she said. My stomach tightened. You're redefining us, I said, in real time. Yes, the man said, thanks to you. The tracker blinked green. My phone buzzed. Task completed. Response quality high. Continue. I stared at the screen, at the ease with which I'd answered, at the absence where my revulsion should have been. The man stood. You're still capable of moral reasoning, he said. That's important. For now, I replied. They moved toward the door. As the woman passed me, she paused. You're doing very well, she said. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel afraid. I felt efficient. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt smaller, not because they'd taken space, because they'd defined it. I sat back down at the table and opened the logging interface. Log 12, Day 7. Mood, stable. Sleep, uninterrupted. Appetite, normal. Pain, none. Fatigue, none. Dream content, minimal. Observation notes. I answered too easily. The response was instant. Log received. Note. Ease of response indicates progress. Thank you for your contribution. I stared at the word, then I stared at my hands. Steady, calm, capable. Still mine, for now. And somewhere, behind screens, behind glass, behind policies written by people who would never sit at my table, someone updated a model, adjusted a curve, learned exactly how much of me they could use before I stopped objecting. The most disturbing part? I wondered what the next task would be, and a part of me, quiet, efficient, newly cooperative, was ready to do it. Day 7 summary, designation orange, phase 3, evaluation of deployment suitability ongoing. Chapter 4, day 12, response latency. By day 12, they stopped pretending the tasks were optional. The prompts no longer asked if I was willing. They assumed I was. The interface changed overnight. No announcement, no explanation. I opened the logging page at 6 a.m. out of habit and found a new section beneath the metrics. Active directives. There were 3 of them. Simple, precise. Delay your response to the next prompt by exactly 90 seconds. Record any internal resistance. Do not inform observation of this directive. I stared at the 3rd line for a long time. It wasn't a test of health. It was a test of obedience under contradiction. I waited the 90 seconds, not because I wanted to comply, but because I wanted to know what it would feel like to refuse. That choice never arrived. When the timer in my head reached 90, my fingers moved on their own. Log 15, day 12. Response delay, 90 seconds. Internal resistance, minimal. Observation notes. The instruction felt neutral. The reply came slower than usual. 2 minutes, 3. I felt the absence like a pressure change. Finally, log received. Directive acknowledged. Discretion confirmed via tracker timestamps. Confirmed. I hadn't told them, but they'd known anyway. That realization should have frightened me. Instead, it settled into place like a solved equation. They called it noon, not the man this time. A woman with a younger voice, sharper edges, less practiced softness. You're exhibiting reduced response latency variance, she said without preamble. Is that bad? It's informative, that word again. You hesitated less during today's directive, she continued. Earlier cases resisted covert contradiction longer. So I'm worse? You're cleaner, she said. You don't waste energy on conflict. I leaned against the window and looked down at the street. A delivery truck idled. Someone laughed across the way. Life continued at a distance that felt theoretical. What happens when there's real conflict? I asked. Define real. When you tell me to do something I don't agree with. A pause. We've already done that, she said. I closed my eyes. When? When we ask you not to contact your sister. I hadn't thought about my sister in 3 days. That realization landed like a bruise blooming late. I agreed with that, I said. No, she corrected. You accepted it. There was a difference. I could see it now, laid out cleanly between us. What are you measuring? I asked. Predictive obedience, she said. Moral persistence. Task degradation. And then we know, she said, how long delayed cases remain operational. Operational? The word didn't even slow my pulse. You're planning, I said, not just observing. Yes. For what? For continuity, she replied. Fast turners collapse systems. Immunes destabilize narratives. You, she paused, and I could almost hear her smiling. You offer something in between. A bridge, I said. A buffer, she corrected. I thought of the shelter footage, the screaming, the chaos. You're going to use us to manage people, I said, to control outbreaks. Guide, she said, intervene early, reduce panic, by putting people like me in the middle. Yes, I pictured it suddenly, clearly. Delayed cases stationed near shelters, near camps, near checkpoints, still articulate, still calm, still trusted, explaining procedures, enforcing compliance, modeling acceptance, holding the line until empathy ran out. And when we turn, I asked. Another pause, this one longer. Then you're replaced. The second directive came that night. Active directive. Rewatch footage from day 7. Identify 3 points of inefficiency. Recommend corrective action. I watched the shelter video again. This time, I didn't see fear. I saw flow problems, crowd density, emotional contagion, poor authority signaling. I typed quickly. Remove vocal agitators first. Reduce visual stimuli. Introduce calm intermediaries early. I hesitated over the last one, then added, delayed onset individuals demonstrate optimal affect for mediation. The response was immediate. Recommendation accepted. Model updated. Model, not policy, not plan. Model meant repeatable, scalable. Later that night, lying in bed, I tried to summon panic. I imagined biting, hunger, loss of control. Nothing came. What did come was a thought, clean, quiet, unwelcome. I would be good at this. My body is optimized for it. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Not because the thought existed, but because it didn't bother me enough. Log 18, day 12. Mood, stable. Sleep, 7 hours. Appetite, normal. Pain, none. Fatigue, none. Dream content, none recalled. Observation notes, I am being positioned. The reply took longer, 5 minutes. Then, log received. Positioning is a natural outcome of utility. Please continue. Utility. I turned onto my side and stared at the wall. Somewhere a chart updated, a threshold adjusted, a decision maker nodded, and the countdown inside me didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt like a schedule. And schedules, I was learning, were very easy to follow. Day 12 summary. Designation orange. Phase 4. Initiate deployment readiness protocol. Chapter 5, Day 18. Deployment readiness. They stopped asking me questions. That was how I knew things had changed. The prompts still arrived every 4 hours, still demanded completion, still parsed my body into neat, obedient metrics. But the tone shifted. No curiosity, no follow-ups, no gentle reframing. Just confirmation. I wasn't being evaluated anymore. I was being cleared. The first sign was the language. Active directive became operational directive. Observation notes became field notes. And one morning, quietly, without warning, the interface added a new section beneath my logs. Simulation results. I hadn't agreed to simulation. I opened it anyway. Scenarios scrolled past my screen. Crowd agitation, checkpoint delays, shelter saturation, resource denial. Beside each scenario was a probability curve, and beside that, a recommended response profile. Mine. Not my name, my pattern. They'd stripped me down to tendencies, response latencies, moral decay rates. They'd learned exactly how long I could be placed between frightened people and armed authority before something essential inside me disengaged. The worst part? Their predictions were accurate. I could feel it when I read them, a quiet recognition, like seeing your own handwriting somewhere you didn't remember writing. They called in the afternoon. The man again, the original voice, calm, familiar. You've reached deployment readiness, he said. I didn't answer right away. Outside my window, snow had begun to fall, thin, precise flakes drifting down without urgency. Deployment where? I asked. Near you, he said, initially. That's not an answer. You'll be positioned in low-risk zones, he continued. Information corridors, transitional spaces. You'll speak to people who are already compliant, or nearly. And what will I say? He smiled. I could hear it. The truth, he said, as you understand it. That chilled me more than any threat. You don't want lies? I said. No, he agreed. We want calm. I sat down slowly. You're using us as proof, I said. Proof that this is manageable, that people can accept what's happening. Yes. And when we stop being convincing, then you'll be rotated out. Rotated where? A pause, just long enough. Secondary containment. I closed my eyes. Not medical, not palliative. Containment. I won't hurt anyone, I said. We know, he replied. That's why you're valuable. The words slid into place easily now. Too easily. I won't force anyone, I added. You won't need to, he said. You'll persuade. I thought of the shelter video, the inefficiencies I'd listed, the calm intermediaries. You're not worried about what this does to us, I said. We are, he replied, in aggregate, not individually. Do I have a choice? I asked. Another pause. You can refuse, he said, but refusal escalates your classification. To what? Unreliable. I laughed then, a short sound, dry. And what happens to unreliable delayed cases? They're isolated earlier, he said. We lose data, but we reduce risk. Risk of what? Of dissent? Of someone like me deciding that awareness was still worth something? I'll think about it, I said. That's acceptable, he replied. Your timeline allows for deliberation. Timeline, there it was again, a schedule. That night, my sister called again. I answered before the tracker could chirp. Where have you been? She demanded, relief and anger tangled in her voice. I've been calling for days. I listened to her speak and felt distance. Not irritation, not guilt. Latency. I've been quarantined, I said. I tested positive. Silence on the line. Oh my God, she whispered. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, and meant it. That doesn't sound like fine. I searched for the right tone, found it. It's delayed. She exhaled shakily. Delayed? Yes. So, you're not sick? Not yet. Her breath caught. Come stay with me. We'll figure it out. I pictured the directives, the classification, the simulations. I can't, I said. Why not? I resisted, not because I was afraid to tell her the truth, but because I was calculating impact, because some part of me now assessed outcomes before emotions. Because I'm being monitored, I said, and because I don't trust myself to stay consistent. Her voice broke. What does that mean? I could have softened it. I didn't. It means I'm changing, I said, and the change is slow enough that I can explain it while it happens. She was crying now. I could hear it clearly. That should have hurt. Instead, I felt a tightening behind my sternum, a mechanical pressure, like a system under load. Please, she said, you don't have to do this alone. I almost told her everything. Almost told her about the simulations, the deployment, the way they turned my future into a role. But I imagined the escalation notice that would follow, the reclassification, the loss of access, and with it, the loss of the only leverage I still had, my awareness. I do, I said quietly. That's the problem. She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't chase the silence. I logged the call. It felt like the appropriate response. Log 27, day 18. Mood, stable. Sleep, 6 hours. Appetite, normal. Pain, none. Fatigue, none. Dream content, none. Field notes. Family contact produces measurable hesitation. Recommend limiting. Language selection trending towards procedural appropriateness. The response took longer than usual. Then, field note acknowledged. Boundary recommendation accepted. I stared at the words. I had just helped them optimize my own isolation. That was the moment I understood the ending they were steering me towards. Utilization. They weren't waiting for me to turn. They were waiting for me to finish being useful. I stood at the window and watched the snow fall, each flake precise, inevitable, following a path determined by forces it would never feel. I wondered distantly how long I would remain capable of wondering. How many days until my objections stopped sounding like objections and started sounding like annotations, and whether, when that happened, anyone would notice the difference. Because I already knew the truth they were building their models around. The most dangerous phase wasn't when we lost control. It was when we still had it and agreed to hand it over willingly. Day 18 summary. Designation orange. Phase 5 deployment pending. Chapter 6, day 26. Termination window. They didn't call it an ending. They never did. The message arrived at 6 a.m., precise as everything else had become. Operational update. Deployment complete. Field performance optimal. Transition to secondary containment scheduled. No questions, no explanation, no option to respond. I sat at my kitchen table with the message glowing on my phone and waited for something to happen inside me. Anger maybe, fear, panic. None of them arrived. The absence had become familiar, like a room I'd already emptied. They used me for 8 days, long enough to establish trust, short enough to preserve it. Not directed, not visibly. I'd been placed near a temporary intake center, 2 blocks from my apartment. I hadn't worn a uniform. I hadn't been armed. I hadn't even been introduced as anything official. I was just present, calm, reasonable, still articulate. People listened to me. That was the point. I told them what I'd been told, that delayed onset wasn't immunity, but it wasn't immediate death either, that compliance increased safety, that panic accelerated outcomes, that order mattered. I didn't lie, I curated. A red-faced man wearing a suit and self-righteousness was trying to mobilize a crowd. They are leaving monsters in our neighborhoods, in our apartment buildings, just waiting for them to attack us. I knew exactly which words would have escalated the situation, and I chose not to say them. I stepped calmly forward. My pulse didn't change. My breathing remained steady. My hands didn't tremble. I am one of the people they leave in neighborhoods. I tested positive, but with a delayed onset. I am continuously monitored and check in every 4 hours. If I show any signs of instability or subterfuge, or any actions that place someone else at risk, I will be taken into secondary containment immediately. I paused to look around the crowds. No rampaging monsters are going to be turned loose on you. Just neighbors, family members, and friends who have received a terminal diagnosis but are still not a danger to anyone else. The man made another half-hearted attempt or two, but the crowd that had started to gather moved on. They did not find me scary. They didn't walk too close to me, but they weren't bracing for attack. I looked too normal, and they lost interest. I watched faces relax when they realized I wasn't shaking, when I didn't avert my eyes, when I spoke about infection like it was weather, dangerous but navigable. I felt nothing except efficient. I watched them accept things they wouldn't have accepted from anyone else. Curfews, separations, waiting. They trusted me because I looked like them, and because I still sounded human. The metrics reflected that. Engagement success rate high. Agitation reduction 43%. Escalation prevention significant. I read the reports later, after the fact. They never asked how it felt, because by then they already knew. Secondary containment was a facility on the outskirts of the city. They didn't blindfold me. They didn't restrain me. They didn't need to. I walked into the transport van on my own, tracker blinking green, pulse steady, thoughts calm and orderly. The man was there, the original voice. He sat across from me as the doors closed. "You performed well," he said. "I know," I replied. "That should have frightened me. It didn't." "You helped us stabilize 3 zones," he continued. "Your presence reduced force utilization by nearly half." "That was the goal," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "and you exceeded projections." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I wondered if he knew what it felt like to be observed the way I had been. "Is this where I turn?" I asked. He considered the question. "Possibly," he said. "Possibly not. And if I don't?" "Then your usefulness will diminish," he said honestly. "You've already contributed most of what you can." There it was. Not cruelty, just accounting. "What happens to me here?" I asked. "Monitoring," he said. "Passive at first. And later?" A pause. "Later we'll stop asking you to explain yourself." I nodded. That felt appropriate. The room they put me in was small, clean, white. The air smelled like bleach and warm plastic. There was a bed, a sink, a screen embedded in the wall displaying my vitals. No restraints, no locks I could see. I sat on the bed and waited for the next prompt. It didn't come. Hours passed, then days. No directives, no tasks, no simulations, just silence. That was when the change accelerated. Without an audience, my thoughts lost urgency. Questions drifted away unanswered and didn't bother returning. Time flattened. I noticed my reflection one morning, standing at the sink, brushing my teeth with precise, efficient movements, and realized I couldn't remember why I used to dislike the taste of the toothpaste. I looked at my hand and thought, efficient, instead of mine. I logged it out of habit. There was nowhere to send it. On day 26, a woman entered the room with a tablet. Not the smiling one, not the sharp one. Someone new. She didn't introduce herself. "You're still aware," she said, scanning my vitals. "Yes," I replied. "That's unusual," she said. I waited. "We're closing your file," she continued. "Your data set is complete." "Am I being moved?" I asked. "No." "Released?" "No." "Then what?" I asked. She hesitated, then chose honesty. "Then we observe what remains when utility is removed," she said. I thought about that, about usefulness, about how carefully they'd preserved my awareness while it served them, and how little effort they were making now. "I was never meant to survive," I said. She didn't deny it. "You were meant to last," she corrected. I nodded. That felt right. The last thing I noticed was the empathy going. Not all at once, just thinning, like a color fading from a photograph. I remembered my sister's voice, dimly, without sharp edges. I remembered the shelter footage without feeling compelled to assign blame or fix flow problems. The room remained the same. The screen still displayed my vitals, stable, optimal, unconcerned. I understood then that the infection hadn't taken my humanity by force. It had been preserved, measured, used, and when it was no longer needed, it was allowed to decay naturally. No drama, no violence, just attrition. I don't know how long I stayed aware after that. Minutes, hours, maybe days. Time had stopped behaving in ways that mattered. The final thought I remember having, clearly, cleanly, was this: they will say the delayed cases were a success. They will cite reduced casualties, improved compliance, predictable outcomes. They will not mention that the most valuable phase of infection was the one where we could still tell them what it felt like to disappear. They will not mention that we cooperated. They won't need to. They already learned what they came for. And when the next outbreak comes, when the next version requires explanation, calm, reassurance, they won't look for a cure. They'll look for someone like me. Someone still responsive, just long enough. Day 26 summary. Designation orange. Deployment phase ended. Field performance optimal. Secondary containment in force until expiration. Epilogue archival note year unknown. The designation delayed onset has since been retired. The term proved misleading. Publicly, The change was framed as a refinement in medical language, an effort to reduce stigma, to prevent misinterpretation by non-specialists. Internally, the reason was simpler. Delay implied uncertainty. What the data demonstrated was predictability. The revised classification, responsive phase carriers, was adopted quietly, circulated through policy briefs and training modules, never spoken aloud near civilians. The phrase tested well with decision makers. It suggested control, utility, time. The archive you are assessing now is a composite. No single subject remains identifiable. That, too, was intentional. Individual narratives were deemed emotionally destabilizing when reviewed outside controlled analytic environments. What you are reading has been standardized, language normalized, redundancies removed, affective spikes flattened into trends. This narrative has been reviewed for destabilizing language. Minor edits have been applied. You should understand, this is not censorship. It is optimization. The subject you've just reviewed performed within expected parameters. Awareness duration above average. Compliance retention exceptional. Empathy decay gradual, measurable, useful. Their logs informed multiple downstream protocols now considered best practice in early stage containment. The success of calm intermediaries is no longer theoretical. Deployment models based on responsive carriers reduced force utilization by 38 to 52% in comparable events. Concerns regarding whether extended awareness constitutes a form of suffering were refused and dismissed after simulations demonstrated no statistically significant impact on public outcomes. Suffering that does not alter outcomes is, by definition, inefficient. The archive will remain sealed except for authorized training and future scenario modeling. If you are reading this as part of orientation, you are encouraged to focus on the charts. If you are reading this out of curiosity, you should stop. Emotional response detected, log required. One final note, preserved at the insistence of a junior archivist and retained for internal transparency. Several responsive carriers attempted to leave unsolicited records, journals, voice notes, unscheduled logs. These materials were excluded from the official dataset due to narrative contamination risk. However, a recurring pattern was observed across those unsubmitted entries. In the final phase, after deployment, after usefulness, after monitoring had shifted from active to passive, many carriers expressed the same concern in varying language. Not fear, not anger, but recognition. They understood, often before we did, that the responsive phase was never a symptom to be cured. It was a resource to be refined. That insight has since been incorporated into planning. Future outbreaks are expected. Archive closed.